Most people, including most political theorists, believe that once one concedes the importance or even the vital necessity of some particular activity of the state, such as the provision of a legal code, that one has ipso facto conceded the necessity of the state itself. The state indeed performs many important and necessary functions, from provision of law to the supply of police and firefighters, to building and maintaining the streets, to delivery of the mail. But this in no way demonstrates that only the state can perform such functions, or indeed that it performs them even passably well. Suppose, for example, that there are many competing cantaloupe stores in a particular neighborhood. One of the cantaloupe dealers, Smith, then uses violence to drive all of his competitors out of the neighborhood. He has thereby employed violence to establish a coerced monopoly over the sale of cantaloupes in a given territorial area. Does that mean that Smith's use of violence to establish and maintain his monopoly was essential to the provision of cantaloupes in the neighborhood? Certainly not, for there were existing competitors as well as potential rivals, should Smith ever relax his use and threat of violence. Moreover, economics demonstrates that Smith, as a coercive monopolist, will tend to perform his service badly and inefficiently. Protected from competition by the use of force, Smith can afford to provide his service in a costly and inefficient manner, since the consumers are deprived of any possible range of alternative choice. Furthermore, should a group arise to call for the abolition of Smith's coercive monopoly, there would be very few protesters with the temerity to accuse these abolitionists of wishing to deprive the consumers of their much-desired cantaloupes. And yet, the state is only our hypothetical Smith on a gigantic and all-encompassing scale. Throughout history, groups of men calling themselves the government or the state have attempted, usually successfully, to gain a compulsory monopoly of the commanding heights of the economy and the society. In particular, the state has arrogated to itself a compulsory monopoly over police and military services, the provision of law, judicial decision-making, the mint and the power to create money, unused land, the public domain, streets and highways, rivers and coastal waters, and the means of delivering mail. Control of land and transportation has long been an excellent method of assuring overall control of a society. In many countries, highways began as a means of allowing the government to move its troops conveniently throughout its subject country. Control of the money supply is a way to assure the state an easy and rapid revenue, and the state makes sure that no private competitors are allowed to invade its self-arrogated monopoly of the power to counterfeit, that is, create new money. Monopoly of the postal service has long been a convenient method for the state to keep an eye on possibly unruly and subversive opposition to its rule. In most historical epochs, the state has also kept a tight control over religion, usually cementing a comfortable, mutually supportive alliance with an established church. With the state granting the priests power and wealth, and the church in turn teaching the subject population their divinely proclaimed duty to obey Caesar. But now that religion has lost much of its persuasive power in society, the state is often willing to let religion alone, and to concentrate on similar, if looser, alliances with more secular intellectuals. In either case, the state relies on control of the levers of propaganda to persuade its subjects to obey or even exalt their rulers. But above all, the crucial monopoly is the state's control of the use of violence, of the police and armed services, and of the courts, the locus of ultimate decision-making power in disputes over crimes and contracts. Control of the police and the army is particularly important in enforcing and assuring all of the state's other powers, including the all-important power to extract its revenue by coercion. For there is one crucially important power inherent in the nature of the state apparatus. All other persons and groups in society, except for acknowledged and sporadic criminals, such as thieves and bank robbers, obtain their income voluntarily, either by selling goods and services to the consuming public, or by voluntary gift, for example, membership in a club or association, bequest, or inheritance. Only the state obtains its revenue by coercion, by threatening dire penalties should the income not be forthcoming. That coercion is known as taxation, although in less regularized epochs it was often known as tribute. Taxation is theft, purely and simply, even though it is theft on a grand and colossal scale which no acknowledged criminals could hope to match. It is a compulsory seizure of the property of the state's inhabitants, or subjects. It would be an instructive exercise for the skeptical reader to try to frame a definition of taxation which does not also include theft. Like the robber, the state demands money at the equivalent of gunpoint. If the taxpayer refuses to pay, his assets are seized by force, and if he should resist such depredation, he will be arrested or shot if he should continue to resist. It is true that state apologists maintain that taxation is really voluntary. One simple but instructive refutation of this claim is to ponder what would happen if the government were to abolish taxation, and to confine itself to simple requests for voluntary contributions. Does anyone really believe that anything comparable to the current vast revenues of the state would continue to pour into its coffers? It is likely that even those theorists who claim that punishment never deters action would balk at such a claim. The great economist Joseph Schumpeter was correct when he acidly wrote that the theory which construes taxes on the analogy of club dues, or of the purchase of the services of, say, a doctor, only proves how far removed this part of the social sciences is from scientific habits of mind.